Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Those of you who came last time, I'm sorry. Those of you who came this time, I'm also sorry. My name's Camille Kaniecki. I'm a senior engineer at ACV Auctions, which we sell wholesale used cars to dealerships. I know nothing about cars and car auctions. I'm on the identity and orgs team, so I'm going to talk about identity things. I put a less crazy idea because last time I gave a similar talk about using shared web workers for token management. This year we're going to do it a little bit differently. I went back and rewrote almost all of that code, and now we're using Broadcast Channel API because it's better. So it's slightly less crazy because this is the way you're actually supposed to do it. If you were unfortunate enough to attend my presentation last time, like I said, I did talk about shared web workers to manage JWT token refresh cycles, and we'll get into a couple of definitions in a minute. Like I said, there's totally a better way to do it, and I rewrote a lot of it. So I'm going to assume for this presentation, since we're in the advanced JavaScript room, that you're coming into this with some basic view knowledge, at least enough to follow along, basic concept of token refresh cycles and stuff like that. I'm going to give out a couple of definitions, but I'm not going to do a deep dive because that's like a whole nother talk. So I hope you all get something out of this, and I hope you like GIFs. All right. I did this last time, but I'm just going to recap because I know a lot of people are new to this conference. So we're going to be using OAuth, just Open Standard Authorization Protocol here. It uses authorization tokens as a proof of identity rather than username and password. This all happens behind the scene, obviously, when you log in with your username and password. We're going to be using JSON for payload data. And I think the rest of it is, we can let it go. A couple of things I do want to mention, though, the distinction between authorization and authentication. So authorization is going to be, well, let's actually start with authentication. You can think of it like your driver's license, right? It's who you are, it's your birth certificate, it's verifying your identity. If you've seen, what is it, Born Identity, where they switch like fingerprints and eyeballs, that's a whole nother can of worms. We're not going to dive into that. I'm assuming you're all who you say you are. And also they told me to take this off because it might hit the mic, and I said, but what if I forget my name? And then he's like, you have bigger problems. So, and then authorization is, I'm assuming you are who you say you are, so what permissions do you have? Like, do you have access to the VIP room or not, for example? I hope that clarifies a little bit. A couple more definitions. So in this case, when we're talking about tokens, we're talking about JSON data that when we decrypt it, it's just going to provide information about the types of authorization assigned to a particular user. So for example, when I log into a system, I'm going to get a JWT back saying, here's all the roles that I have. I'm actually this person. Here's how long this ticket is good for, more or less. JWT stands for JSON Web Token. But if we just say JWT without JWT token, it just feels wrong. So we're just going to say JWT tokens. So it's token. I made that big deal about authorization and saying who you are. But really, if I gave you my token, the internet would think you were me. They're not going to do any checking. So for all intents and purposes, if I had my VIP badge and I gave it to Julia, Julia could totally enter the VIP area for 15 minutes. How do we solve that? Like on an internet scale, we obviously don't want to allow site jackers and things like that. We just have them expire after a really short period of time. So in this case, I think the standard is around 15 minutes, but it's customizable. That's the main type of token that we're going to be changing, but there's also a refresh token. So we talked about a driver's license. You can imagine it as like your visa, right? As long as your visa is still valid, or your birth certificate, or your passport, you can get a new driver's license, right? It's the one thing that lasts longer, but in this case, we're going to say it doesn't carry any sensitive information, and it's longer lasting. Before I go any farther, did I lose anybody? I know identity is really exciting stuff. Okay, we're almost done. Everybody knows what an SPA is. We're in the advanced JavaScript room, but we're going to just be calling it a single page application. And the very basics of token refresh is basically you need a refresh token to get a new JWT. And remember, we established that the JWT is going to expire very frequently, roughly every 15 minutes, and we're going to, in order to get a new one, we're going to need to pass along the old refresh token to get one. So once we do that in the current service that we're going to be demoing, it is going to invalidate the previous refresh token. which is important for what I'm going to demo, but it doesn't always need to be that case. So depending on which service you're using, excuse me, you could have a refresh token, and then it could be good for a long period of time, and you can reuse it multiple times, but for our purposes, we're going to assume once I turn it in, you get a new one. It's almost over with the definitions, I promise. Okay, so this may be self-evident, but obviously we need to have a site be secure, but we also need it to not be a crappy user experience. So we want to ask people and check basically their identification enough times that we can still make sure that, hey, you are who you say you are and that you have every right to be here, but not all the time so that you decide never to use my site again. So in the case of single-page applications, it's one of the common ways to do it is just to call a token refresh endpoint and refresh the tokens on a set timed interval, which is what I talked about last year. It's ideal. Realistically, we're not going to be doing that this year, so there's other ways to do it. But like oftentimes, like there's a polling timer, and it will just keep it refreshed. I already said this, but if you exchange a refresh token on this particular demo, it's going to invalidate the old one just in case, and then when we hit that endpoint, we're going to get a new refresh and a new JWT token. Okay, sounds easy, or does it? When I first ran into auth, I was like, what is happening? Oh, God. But it's really, really, really hard to avoid, especially when, so I mentioned we did used car auctions. We do wholesale dealership car auctions. And one of the things that dealerships like to do is have multiple tabs open because they'll be like actively watching auctions as they timing down. So it's really difficult in environments like that where you have refresh requests without getting stale data, right? Because if we have multiple tabs that are trying to refresh a token at the same time, they have no idea that the other one is also trying to do it. So there's lots of different ways that people have come up with to manage it so that doesn't happen. Yeah, I think I just said that, but like really common example, your refresh token, which you need to get a new JWT, in this service is invalidated as soon as you use it, right? So let's say we have two tabs that are making the same call at almost the exact same time. The service itself has like a rough buffer, right? So it's going to get two requests for the same refresh token, but the first one gets invalidated and works, and then the second time it throws an error and it says, well, you've already used this token, you can't use it again. So it may or may not, depending on how you have your state managed, it could log you out of the site, it could just fail, and it's very confusing and a very sad world. So some of the things we do to solve this problem are involving custom refresh token locking mechanisms, which we sort of use, but they're a pain in the butt. Free-for-all requests with graceful failing of unauthorized calls, meaning we allow you to use the same refresh token multiple times as long as it's within an accepted window, which I think we're still doing a little bit, right? What is our current window? 30 seconds. Thank you. I should know this. I don't. Silent on authentication, which I'm not going to go into today. But what I would like to talk about is the utilization of background threading. So with web workers or broadcast channels. So last year, I had a dress on. I wanted to talk to you about shared web workers to manage token refresh cycles on a timed interval. But guess what? There's actually a way better way to do that with a lot less code. So the new proposition is we're going to be simplifying this a lot with the broadcast channel API. And I hope my slides are in order. Okay. There are multiple types of web workers. You may or may not have seen them. You probably have. Regular web workers, which are separate background threads, but they can only be accessed by the script which created it. So you could think about it as a separate JavaScript or a multi-thread, but within the same context, right? Same browser context. Shared web worker is a little bit different. It can be accessed by any script in any browser tab from the same domain, so with the same core as origin. So like you can be using it from an iframe, a tab, a window, as long as they're all coming from the same domain. It's the same concept. There's kind of a slow adoption of shared web workers, and I think a lot of that had to do with just the fact that it wasn't supported by Safari and Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer's dead. It's not a problem anymore. So now with things like that, there are more and more like special use cases coming out. And one of them is broadcast channel, which is a type of shared web worker. Because it's a type of shared web worker, it's the same concept, right? So you can access it by any script in any browser tab with the same core as origin. And I stole these pictures from the internet. Hope nobody cares. I don't know if anybody here has worked with message port before, the message port object or API. All right, I'll cover it briefly. But what the broadcast channel API does is basically it's an extension of the message port object, and it allows basic communication between browsing contexts that is one-to-many. So shared web worker is many-to-many. Broadcast channel is nice and simple in that it's one-to-many. So if I am to, well, I'll go into this in a little more detail. Let me actually skip to that. Because it's one-to-many, there's totally different ways of using it, but what most people do is they will assign a leader. So whatever context is and however you decide to assign it, that is going to be the leader who's doing the broadcasting and managing the messages to the channel, and then every other context will basically be receiving those messages. It is now supported by every major web browser, and I will share the links later. This is a quick, I stole this from Mozilla. Sorry, not sorry. But it's a really nice, I think, just visual of it. So the broadcast channel, again, exists outside of our main threads, which is really nice because it allows different states to talk to each other and sync up. That uses the post message because we're using the messaging API and the on message. That's really all you need to know. And I'm going to give a super, super basic demo about it after this. But whichever context is posting the message, then all of the other contexts receive the on message, and so on. There are a couple of caveats. I've said this before, but it really bears repeating. You have to have the same core, same origin policy. Probably the most important one is that web workers, and therefore broadcast channels, they're not able to access the DOM elements or the window object directly. So it's really just for messaging. Like when I say it's like a message port, it's like you send a message to do something, but then you need separate code. Either depends on how you want to do it, but I usually have a separate script running outside of my main SPA source just to handle the shared web workers. It's not supported by IE, but that can RIP in pieces. I said that already. Okay, so I'm just jumping ahead of myself because that's what I do. But I just want to reiterate, these are just messages. This is not state. This is not something you want to use to send complex objects or JSON objects or anything like that. You can. It's going to be stringified, and it's probably going to cry at you. So I would say just short and simple, and then use those. Hold on, I don't know if I can close this. Okay, sorry, that was super distracting. Yeah, so keep it simple, and then have your code say, when I get this message, I know what I'm supposed to do with it. There's many use cases for this. We're going to talk about authentication management, because I kind of gotta. It can be used for polling, right? So like if you are checking for updates to car auctions or something, you don't need to be doing it on every single tab to share the data, right? So you can use the broadcast API to have your leader say, make the API call, and either store it to state or whatever, and then the other tabs know that they need to pull from local storage or however you're managing your state. So it's a nice way to not spam your API endpoints. Notifications is another one. As you can imagine, if you're on one tab and you have an auction on another tab, you want to know that it's about to expire. Normally, the browser has no way of knowing that what the other tab is doing. You can use message port, shared web workers, and broadcast channels to register them as they come in, and then whichever tab you're viewing can show the notification. And then I don't know if you've ever been to like Verizon or any other site, and they have those really obnoxious chatbots, and they pop up on every instance of the tab that you go on. They're probably using broadcast channel. Okay, so I put together a super, like I tried to make it the most basic of basic examples, just to show what's going on. And then we'll show an example that's actually hopefully interesting. Okay, so first of all, let me just spin it up. Let me just show you what's going on. And the font is super big on my screen. Can everybody read that okay? I'm doing my best here. Okay, so what did I do? Actually, let me just walk through it really fast. So I just have a script that I'm just going to call broadcast channel helper. I'm just abstracting a lot of the logic and just putting it outside of my main app. We're not doing anything except listening for messages, and on message is supported by default if the browser supports broadcast channel. I'm assigning it a name, which is very exciting. It should have been BC channel, but I guess it's broadcast demo. I don't know what I was thinking at 2 a.m. And this is just a very generic, when we have a message received or when we have an error, let's just call these specific functions so that I can just console log for the sake of the demo. So because this is a demo, I'm just gonna be console logging. I'm not gonna do any fancy UI stuff. I'm saving that for the other one. In my main application, why is app bar open? Go away. I just have a text field and I just have an input. So I'm just gonna be showing that when I put a value in the input and I hit the button, that the other tabs will be aware of its existence. That's all I'm trying to do here. What I am doing is I am establishing the broadcast channel once, so I am actually storing it in state, just so that if one already exists, we don't have to create another one. I'm going to initialize a new instance of it, and when I receive the input added message type, I'm going to just handle click. We can also handle click when we click on the button, but this handle click is going to be triggered on the non-leader tabs. Everybody follow so far? I know I'm like terrified, so I'm talking really fast. So please tell me to slow down if it's bad. Okay. The only last thing I want to mention is just that you always want to close out your broadcast channels after you close your site, because even if you close all of your tabs, your broadcast channel will still live. It will just not have a leader. And Chrome gets very, very sad when this happens. So always turn it out, or close it out. And my main example, which we'll go through, I'll do it on the on before destroy lifecycle hook, but you always want to make sure you're clearing it out. Until you decide to clear all of your application data in Chrome. And sometimes what will happen is if you try to establish a broadcast channel with the same name, most of the time Chrome knows that, hey, I'm going to use that same channel. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. So every once in a while, it'll just get confused that you're asking it to do something and it'll just throw a bunch of errors in console. Most of the time, it's okay. The trick is, when you're doing it, you want to be consistent with your naming. So where'd it go? Sorry, oh, it's in my helper. So in this case, the demo name, the naming is super important.
I've used websites that don't handle that properly and have had to clear the application data to be able to log back into them.
Yep.
It's really frustrating.
It's bad. Make sure you clean up your mess. That's like it's like camping, right? Cleaner than you left it with web workers. Okay, so let me just really quickly demo just to show you that this actually does the thing that I promised you that it does. Okay. Oh, I actually have several tabs open. So let me open my console because I'm going to be doing console logs. And I have 2 tabs open. Actually, maybe I'll open 3. Oh my God, that is so small. Hang on, let me make it bigger. Nope. Well, we needed to do that too. Okay. So I'm just logging various things here so you can see that we actually have a broadcast channel here. Let me make sure these are good. Let me try to make the UI bigger. Okay. Hopefully is that okay for everybody in the back? Okay, so let's just say, hi people. So I'm going to go ahead and test. I'm going to go over to these other tabs here, and you can see that it did receive the hi people. It's very, very simple, and both of these tabs received that message. So that's like the simplest example. That's very boring. Let's do something more exciting. Where's my presentation? Okay. So cool, now that we understand what's happening, again, the mechanism that we're using is the message port object, which is now supported by every major browser. So really, we can use these all the time if we want to. It's an interface for the channel messaging API. And like I said, on message, post message, and terminate. That's really all you need. There's a couple of other ones in there, and I really have never found a use case for them. If you do, hit me up. I like to play with stuff. Okay, so let's have a meatier implementation. Sorry to all the vegans in the room. We're gonna be cheating a little bit in that there's this really, really nice NPM package that does a lot of heavy lifting for us, and it abstracts away all of those scripts, and I totally used it. So I apologize for nothing. It's this really nice broadcast channel NPM package. But what I like about it, in addition to the fact that it's abstracting this stuff away, because as you saw, it was like 12 lines of code. Like, why would I need to do that? This has really, really good leadership election. So one of the things that I mentioned before is that we want to know which tab is managing the channel. And when you have multiple tabs open, how do we know which tab that is, right? With this one, we are able to do, hold on, scroll down. Hold on. I just saw it, sorry. There we go. There's this leader election functionality built in that, to be fair, has a couple of bugs in it, but for the most part works really well. What we're going to be doing is saying, once we create a channel, we're going to elect a leader. And then once we have leadership, we're going to do something. And it works really, really well. The only thing I found so far that doesn't really work is that you can't manually kill a leader, even though the site says you can. We'll worry about that another day. So what did we do with it? Let's see. I'm going to walk through another example of sanitized code from ACV that hopefully has nothing. Hopefully I removed everything from it. We're going to be using Vue. We're still on Vue 2. We're working on it. Vuex. We're going to be using the NPM package that I just demoed. Okta authentication, if there's any Okta people in the room. And then we're also going to be using the ACV Auctions Identity Service and Mobile Gateway. So I'm going to give a live demo, and then I'm going to attempt to, through a series of charts, explain what is happening. Okay, so let me spin that up really quick. So you may ask why it's called GOAT Tools. It stands for the General Order Administration Tool. I got outvoted. We voted for GOAT. Okay, so before I walk through what's going on, let me do this. Okay, and then let me make this, since I zoomed in, some of the font gets cut off at the top. It's just a title. For the sake of the demo, we can leave it. Pro tip, don't play with browser zoom the day of a conference. Okay, I'm gonna open 2 tabs like I did before. This is going to be a little bit more interesting. So first of all, let me just start by saying, let me log out. As you can see, it preserved my session from before. I'm going to log in via Okta. It's all going to be handled behind the scenes. I'm going to get my JWT token and so on. Oh, hold on. Damn it, Okta. Got to get my push notification. Of course, I muted all of my notifications. So give me a second. Please? Yay, okay. There we go, all right. So I'm just gonna show you. I could go into state, but for the sake of just the demo, I'm actually logging my JWT and refresh token to the screen. Please do not steal my identity. If you can memorize that, I will be really impressed. I'm also going to mark whether or not this is the channel leader, because I'm assigning the channel leadership. So if I open up this other tab and reload it, because I'm already logged in, you'll see that it's not the leader, but that it has the same refresh token data, ABO2, ABO2. So I'm going to ignore the refresh user data button because you're not going to see anything behind on the front end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh the token. As you can see, it updates here. If I go over here, just because it's a demo, but you'll see that it reflects the same information, right? So what is actually happening? Let me show you. And I don't know if this is going to work because I did this all like this. So if anything doesn't make sense or if you want me to go slower, let me know. So the basic ecosystem setup for what we're doing for token management is we're going to have our active tab. And in this case, it's going to be Vue.js. We're going to have an Axios interceptor, which, anybody not know what's going on with that? Okay, so Axios is basically going to say anytime we have an API call, we're going to manipulate it in some way. And what we're going to be doing is we're either going to be signing it with a JWT or we're not, depending on use cases. There are some use cases where we don't want to use a JWT token, like when you're logging in, because you won't have one, stuff like that. So this is basically just running that check, and I'll go into it a little bit more detail. It is fully supported by NPM and Vue, and there's packages for it everywhere. It's pretty standard, so I'm going to kind of glaze over it. I hope that answers the question a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. And then we're just, for the sake of the demo, we're still using Vuex because it's a live code base, and we're still updating things. Like our demo, and I'm going to go into the code after this, like the really simple demo, we have our broadcast channel. It's going to be created by the Vue application, and it's going to live on the side. So when we normally make a call, we're going to have Vue is going to reach out to the Axios interceptor, which is going to say, In this example, I'm going to go connect to some other API endpoint. In this implementation, we are going to be storing our tokens in local storage, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. But the first thing it's going to do is it's going to check local storage, see if the JWT is almost expired or not. If it is, if it's not expired, it's going to use it to connect to some API endpoint, and then the interceptor is going to send it back to the active tab. So far, so good? I know, riveting. Okay. Normal refresh token, so on the off chance that our Axios interceptor went to Vuex storage and saw that the JWT token is getting old, like me, it's going to hit the token refresh API endpoint. It's going to send the refresh token that it has. It's going to get a new JWT refresh token. It's going to come back to the interceptor, save it to storage, and then complete the process as usual. And this is pretty standard. So where does the broadcast channel come in? Okay, let's assume that we're in that situation and our JWT is in its final throes of life. What we're going to do is we're going to first send a message to the broadcast channel that says we are attempting to make a token refresh. Reason being, if we have multiple tabs open for any reason and they would attempt the same thing, we want to let them know to not. So it's a super, super basic locking mechanism, but it's super easy to implement. Then let's say we complete our refresh token, we've got our new stuff, we've written it, we're happy, then we send that message to the broadcast channel. Nothing changes on the inactive tab for Vue.js because it's still technically inactive, right? It has this queue of messaging waiting to, it hasn't done anything with it until we make it active, basically. So let's say we switch tabs, okay? We're gonna go to the previous inactive tab, which is now active. Oh my God, you can't see any of my colors. I just realized, oh no. I have pretty colors in my thing, see? I'm so sorry. We're just gonna pretend that this is a thing. I apologize. Hopefully this still works, but it's way less interesting. Okay, where was I? Okay, we switched tabs. I'm sorry, I don't know why I did this. Once we switch tabs, it's going to get the message that, hey, we did a token refresh. It's going to pull a new one from local storage, and then it's going to come back and work with that and proceed to the Axios interceptor as normal. So why do we even bother to refresh our state when we have our interceptor? Do you think? Go ahead. I see you. You know the answer, Boris. No. Because there's going to be cases where we don't want to. Use the interceptor because of one reason or another, mostly because either we don't have the login information or we have an externally exposed endpoint or something like that. We don't need it in those cases. I'm so sad about my images. So then, actually, let me cover this, and then I think I'll go switch to the code. I'm trying not to jump around too much, but with auth stuff, like it's all so interconnected, it's really hard to talk about things in isolation. So I'm going to do my best. In terms of the leadership election that we mentioned, what happens if we close that tab? So in this particular NPM package, which was carefully vetted, they do a really good job of we assign a new leader, and it works great. I'm going to show that in a minute, actually. Let's show that now. Yes, okay. Okay, let me start from the beginning. See if I can make this smaller. Is this the most exciting talk you guys have been to so far? All right, where do I start? All right, so we're gonna start really, really similar to how we did the really basic demo. There's a lot going on here. I put all of the token refresh code into a mixin, which I'll cover in a minute. Just again, we're just cleaning it up. We don't want it in our app.js. We have, it's not defined here, but it's defined in our mixin. We are still going to save our broadcast channel in state. We don't want to make it if it already exists. And let's see what else. And so here, because we have them managed elsewhere, we are going to be pulling them with a Vuex getter. So far, so good? So let me come back to the watch. But basically, when we start a new instance, when we open a new tab, we have a new window, we get to call mounted. And what we're going to do is we are going to firstly say, are we already logged in? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to pull that authorization information from local storage, like we talked about already. We're saving it in local storage, that way all of the tabs can access it. Once we do that, we're going to pull our JWT token, we're going to check for authorization, And if we have one, then we're going to decode it and see how much time we have left, which, oops, go away. Nothing crazy. We're just going to say if we have, if it's going to expire in the next 2 minutes, we should probably just get a new one. Then, if we don't have a broadcast channel, we're going to make one. Very exciting. And then if we don't already have a token refresh in progress, we're going to try to refresh it right away. So every time we open a new tab, we just want to make sure we're not dealing with stale information. Let's see what else. Oh, I do want to mention that we do kill it on close. Where is that life cycle hook? There is a die function in here. I may have stripped it out. Okay, very, very important, just like we mentioned before, when you are using shared web workers, because you're outside of the main thread, you need to clean up after yourself. So make sure you're killing it and you're closing your channel. And I'm also setting it in state to null, just in case. So what is actually happening? I'll get to the interceptor in a minute. Actually, let's do that now. So the interceptor, going to be doing almost the very same thing. The only difference is it's outside of the component state, right? So what we're going to be doing, this is just a whitelist. Like if we're logging in, obviously we should exclude it from the interceptor. We're also letting it know that we want to pull from local storage. And then here is all of our getters from the stuff that we've defined, our broadcast channel and our current tokens. If we actually want to use the interceptor and we have a token, we're going to do the same date check we had before. We want to make sure that if it's going to expire in the near future, we should probably refresh it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do two different things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to post a message to the broadcast channel saying, hey, we're going to do the thing. So we're going to lock it so that the other tabs don't do it. But then we're also going to call the refresh token on the main leader tab. Because if you saw from the demo, the way the broadcast channel works is that only the non-leaders will get the message. So you still actually have to handle it on the leader tab. So that's why it's there twice. Then we're going to update state. And then if everything's fine and good after that, then we're just going to add it to our headers and complete our API request. Really exciting. Super exciting stuff. Okay, let me see. A couple of other things just to mention. I did just make a Vuex module for the broadcast channel stuff just so that we could have multiple tabs accessing the same broadcast channel. I'm just trying to be clean and neat, but you don't need this. So this is just super, super basic. What's more interesting? I don't think we need that either. So in terms of just the mix-in then, for what we're doing for the broadcast channel. So in the NPM package in particular, it has everything nicely encapsulated away. You have to import the leadership election separately from the broadcast channel. We're going to pull all that information in. We're going to be keeping track of the elector in the mix-in because we want all of them to be using the same one. And we're going to be setting is channel leader. So remember we had on the super simple example, we had the on message. If we get a message, do something, that's all this is. It's pretty generic so that we can have messages of multiple type. So if it's start token refresh, do a thing. If it's end token refresh, do a thing. Super, super, super basic. But honestly, it works great. Like, I'm so happy with the result because we've been fighting with just not having expired tokens for so long. So even though this doesn't look very exciting, the whole fact that it's outside of the main thread and it's all accessible just really solved that problem in a really great way. A couple of other things about the NPM package in particular, which I realize I'm totally plugging for them. I should get a t-shirt. They have really, really good fallbacks. It's not so big of an issue now, because like I said, it was mostly for Safari and Internet Explorer. But now that it's supported, I still leave it in. Web worker support is that at the time, when I did this about a year ago, not every browser still supported shared web workers. So if shared web workers are not available, it has basically a prototype for web workers, which kudos to these guys. That sounds crazy. If we're not in a Jest environment or a vtest environment, we're always going to try to make our active tab the leader. So the reason why we do that is because people are switching between tabs, and it just makes sense to say, if there isn't a leader and you're on a tab, it should probably be the leader because it's someone you're interacting with the most. And then if there isn't one, we're just going to await leadership, set ourselves to true, and then so on. That's pretty much it. Once we get the refresh messages on the child tabs, once it gets that message and then it becomes active and visible again, then basically it's just going to say, if I'm the leader, and if there's not already a token in progress, it's the same logic as before. I'm just going to call the refresh token stuff. And that's it. I did call a next tick just so that we could show a change on the UI, so it does something. And I think that's it. There's only so much you could talk about. We did have a use case where I did try to use it for something more exciting in Hackathon, but that had a lot of proprietary information in it, so I couldn't really demo it. But you can use it for a bunch of stuff that isn't necessarily off. Thank you.